What is acknowledged, besides the grief itself, is the fact that it takes a lot of courage to feel into the depths of our emotions. And it is wearying and illness-making to try to hold it at bay. Jenny Chapin. Welcome everybody to week 12, Creating Avenues for Grieving. And let's take some time to light our candle and create a container for grief. Or turn on our candle. I want to say that, lighting our candle for grief, it seems to have, I'm observing right now that it seems to have, for me at least, it seems to have both brevity and joy. Joy that we're here together, that we're acknowledging this together, that we've already done as much as we've done to get to the point where lighting a container for grief together includes joy. I think we've come far to have that happen. I just want to acknowledge that.
And settle down. That's it, just trusting into the body. Moving our awareness back into our body and closing our eyes. No external visual stimulus to be distracted. Just coming back to the breath. That's it. Back to the breath and rest. Irrespective of the thoughts and feelings that we're experiencing internally. That may be true, that may be not. Just part of our story. Come back to the breath because that's fact. Experience, not fantasy. And as we pay such close attention to that inward and outward passage of air that nourishes our bodies, be aware of that breath perhaps as a gate. A gate to opening, even if it's just slightly ajar, that door to awareness of the grief that we carry. The grief, a loss that we're aware of, perhaps all too readily aware of. And of those losses that perhaps we'd rather that we weren't aware of. This is the space to acknowledge them. Invite them through the door and sit them down as guests. It's an inviting those guests in for a conversation. That attitude towards our loss and grief that perhaps we can cultivate today. Invitations whom we can grow and learn from. Doing that. A few more moments. Return to the breath cap. Return to the breath. That keeps us in here now. Keeps us present with our experience. Always back to the breath. That's it. In your own time, folks, return as to your, and as you do, your eyes turn to the group.
So while you're doing that, I want to ask this question. And we touched upon this at the end of last week, that we were going to start touching upon this question for the next few weeks. When will I allow grief and grieving? Daily? Anytime a grief wave takes me? At designated times and places? All of the above. And only you can answer that. My answer is all of the above, but sometimes I pay more attention to one or the other. We assume grief has emotional effects for a period of time. We assume this. Most people are unaware, however, that grieving is a complex process involving psychological, cognitive, social, and spiritual components in order to adapt to a changed reality. I'm going to read that one again. Most people are unaware that grieving is a complex process involving psychological, cognitive, social, and spiritual components in order to adapt to a changed reality. Additionally, losses affect survivors forever because they change their view of the world and of themselves. And when I say survivors, I don't necessarily mean a death survivor, although that is true. I mean a survivor of something that has changed us, some loss that has changed us. Additionally, losses affect survivors forever because they change their view of the world and of themselves. The task of discovering who am I now and finding a path to healing represents relearning the world. Everyone has the right to tell the truth about their own life. Ellen Bass. Fill your paper with the breathings of your heart. William Wordsworth. And now we're going to get into the meat of what we're doing today, which is self-discovery, opening to grief through deep journaling. So start a new journal page. Prepare right now. If you need to go get your journal or something that you're going to write on, please do that. And you might want to label the top, Discovering Myself Through Grief, or come up with another label that makes sense for you. And when I give you this next slide, don't worry that there's a whole lot of writing on it. We're going to break it down. I didn't break down the slides because I want you to be able to come back to it and see everything. But don't read everything all at once, okay? And remember to do your self-care throughout this writing experience. Take breaks when you need to. Do the things you need to do to bring yourself into a place where this is meaningful for you, and it's also something you can handle. Remember that there is this container for grief, and that we are all being held right now. This grief that is going to come up is being held. And always stand up and breathe and stretch. So Jenny Chapin, that quote at the beginning, Jenny Chapin is deeply involved in writing as a means of moving through things. And Jenny came up with these writing prompts, starting with listing griefs that I want to acknowledge. So maybe you could start out with that, griefs that I want to acknowledge. Now you may or may not be still adding to that list. You go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add another prompt, and you can come back to this, or you can start it wherever you're at. What brought you to this point of wanting to unpack your grief, of knowing it was time? Again, wherever you're at, just keep on going. I'm going to add another prompt. You can use this now or later. What have you felt to be the cumulative effect or effects of holding grief at bay? So again, continue where you're at. I'm going to add more prompts if you need them or want them. In 3 to 5 paragraphs for each circumstance of grief, and maybe you could just pick one and see how you roll with that. There are all sorts of things that you could do with it. Describe the circumstance. Was any grieving done at the time or soon after? If not, why not? What feels left out? What is still waiting for your acknowledgement, your attention? I'm going to leave this screen up, and you can just come back to it at will.